Good evening. Welcome to our special meeting of Municipal Council for Monday, January 16th, 2023. For the town of East Gwillimbury, I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declarations of interest. I don't see any at this time. I will move to our land acknowledgement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and I didn't ask about declaration of interest. I should do that. We did. We'll move to land acknowledgement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the land originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaty First Nation and other Indigenous peoples. And on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as East Gwillimbury's closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of these territories. They are the water protectors and the environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. I'll move to item D, and that is deputations, and I don't see any at this time. We'll move along to our workshop, and this is a Council Strategic Planning Workshop presentation continue, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Webster. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and it's good to see you back in the chambers after missing your first meeting of your career, last one. And I just wanted to take this time, given our 3-decade relationship, to express our collective condolences to the loss of your mom in her 101st year. It was a special lady, and we just want to let you know we're here for you and feeling for you at this time.
Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor and members of council, this evening we have another of our additional workshops that we've added to kickstart and ramp up our 2023 year. And this week, actually, we have 2 very interesting workshops. Tonight, we have another iteration of our strategic plan, and the importance of that can't be understated. It's really about defining what our council, our elected officials want to achieve over the next 4 years, and it sets the framework for all of the programs, services, and decisions that are made this term. And the process has been moving along really well. I'd like to give kudos and acknowledge Margot Bajin and her facilitation team. And once again, this is a made in EG solution. We haven't used outside consultants nor graphic designers, and it's something we're very proud of in moving this initiative forward. I talked to my colleagues that sit at the Ontario CAOs Association and Board of Directors, and a lot of them are just starting to think about a strategic plan for this term of council. So we're well on our way, and tonight will be another iteration. I just want to remind all, and to those of the public that may be viewing in as well, Wednesday we have an additional workshop, again on one of Council's very important strategic pillars and initiatives for this term. It's on the environmental stewardship and sustainability, and that will be Wednesday at 10 a.m. So on that note, what I'd like to do is introduce Margot Bajin. She's our Acting General Manager of Development Services. She has assembled a small tactical team of fellow employees, and tonight Margot is going to provide the next update, and we look forward to the fulsome council discussion that will occur this workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Webster. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening to you, and through you to all members of council. I'm excited about the progress that we've been making, and I think we're getting close to having sort of a draft strategy ready that we'll be able to share with key stakeholders and members of the public. But before we get to that point, and we have another opportunity to have some input and discussion with yourselves, and just sort of to confirm that we are in fact heading in the right direction and reflecting the priorities and wishes of council for this term. If you'd like to turn to the next slide, please. The proposed content, and I'm modeling it off of the document that was produced for the last term of council, which is essentially a booklet that was produced with outlining the strategic priorities and the vision and core purpose for the organization. So the idea, as I understood from council's input, that this worked really well, and having physical reference as well as an online tool was really useful. So the content that we're proposing is based on building a similar type of tool that could be shared with members of the public and with our own internal team as well. So it would outline sort of the key themes and strategic drivers. It would include a message from the mayor and council and some context for how the strategy was developed and why we go through a strategic planning process. It would contain the updated vision statement and the core purpose, and would talk about sustainability as our sort of overarching strategic lens and the 3 elements of sustainability. It will go into the 5 strategic priority areas of focus, the high-level strategic priorities, and then something that's new is we would include some high-level deliverables. We had talked early on in this process about being able to include metrics and performance indicators, and I think by including having the list of deliverables included, it makes it much easier to reference as we're reporting back on progress through the plan. Departments can then sort of outline the actions and tactics they've undertaken and how that moves the needle in terms of achieving the deliverables that are listed. So hopefully that will add to increased understanding and transparency around council's goals. And then of course the last page would be talking about that process of how we align with the corporate budget process, how we align with measuring our progress with individual and departmental work plans, and then how that all sort of aligns with the strategic plan. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is sort of the latest iteration of the graphic that was designed by our talented communications team, and certainly invite any feedback or thoughts on both the content and sort of the design, but the idea was to sort of take that concept that came out of the last workshop, the idea of sustainability at our core, and have a graphic representation of that, and then reflect where we seem to be heading with the sort of the 5 strategic priority areas. So this, we'll get into more discussion around the actual design elements once you have a draft in front of you, but just at a high level, just want to make sure that this is hitting the right notes, that there's no significant concerns or anything that's missing from this theme or this idea that sustainability is at our core. If that's okay, I'll move on to the next slide, please. I think, and this language may still require some further reflection because we want to make sure that the language is accessible, but we do want to be able to express in the context of the document and the work that we do going forward that sustainability is at the heart of everything we do, and that it's about not only meeting the needs of today's community, residents and businesses, but ensuring that that we're not impacting or impairing the ability of future generations to not only access the community resources and participate in the economy, but to actually thrive. So we're trying to get that point across, that sustainability is not about maintaining the status quo, that it's about being better, being more effective, being more efficient, and in setting up the next and future generations for even more success. The idea of sustainability as a lens through which we examine each decision, and ensuring that our decisions reflect a balanced focus on how it impacts environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social well-being and social sustainability, and sort of looking to how we integrate that into our evaluation of reports and projects and initiatives that come forward before council. So in a practical sense, we want to move to the next slide. We've taken the opportunity to draft just some preliminary questions that might form, the basis of an analysis that is included in a report to council, for example. We had some discussion around how, at the conclusion of reports right now, there's an identification of which strategic priority it aligns with. And the suggestion was that it might be too high level to be meaningful. So just wanted to sort of get your thoughts on these questions, and, trying to keep it high level enough that we don't get sort of into the weeds, but also make sure that we are taking an opportunity each and every time to come back and reflect and be able to say, that this decision is actually going to be positive, for the environment, or that it is going to move the needle in terms of addressing the impacts of climate change, or mitigating or lessening those impacts, those kinds of things. So any thoughts on these as sort of a starting point, and with the idea that they may eventually live as part of our council reports and offer that kind of like checkpoint?
Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think this is really important. I think it's going to be key that however these questions are answered, it's answered in a meaningful and significant way. It's not just about checking the box. I was trying to think of an example that we had here a few years ago where someone said, oh, this actually helps the environment, but it was such a stretch that I was like, not really, So I think when I'd rather reports were honest and said this doesn't actually impact the environment one way or the other, but it has to be done because it's part of our core business or whatever. So I would ask staff, when you're looking at these questions, to be honest and don't go for that stretch, because when you go for the stretch, it takes away from the ones that actually have a big impact.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I think there's probably, and maybe communications can potentially help with how we can structure a report to accurately reflect that this analysis or this reflection has taken place. We talked about different, these are questions that council could ask when a report comes forward. It can be integrated into the body of a report, and certainly for certain legislated services, it may not necessarily be. It's always relevant, but it may not necessarily advance our objectives when it comes to environmental stewardship. But I just wanted to make sure that, as at least as a start, if we ask these questions, it would hopefully ensure that important level of reflection takes place. On the next slide, the social sustainability piece. We look at, does this support equity, diversity, and inclusion? Does it contribute to a sense of belonging? There are myriad different questions we could ask that would all, positively benefit social sustainability, but our intent here was to look at what council's already identified as priorities for this term of focus, and look at it through that kind of perspective, and equity, diversity, and inclusion being a significant component of the work that we're trying to do. So that's why I've highlighted that there. And the idea of inviting broad community participation, I think that speaks to our objectives around accessibility, communication, making sure that there is, sort of that, not only, it could be engagement in terms of the civil process, but it could also be participation in terms of the types of programs and services that we offer, that it appeals to a broad range of age groups, different abilities, different ethnic backgrounds. All of those kinds of things could be considered when you're talking about broad community participation. Again, these aren't necessarily the only questions you could ask, but trying to ensure that we keep these goals top of mind as we go forward. Next slide, please, is when we talk about economic sustainability through a sustainability lens. At the foundation, will this decision increase economic opportunity for our residents and businesses? Obviously, we don't want to do things that detract from the economic ability of or position of our residents and businesses. And will it contribute to provide value for sustainable tax base and support programs and services? So, I think the things that move us toward a more balanced residential commercial tax split, all of those things can be encompassed in these questions, and when we ask them, and I think we should be asking them to make sure that we're doing the right things. When in terms of job creation, for example, hopefully when we ask this question about economic opportunity for our residents, we're looking at the skill sets and the, making sure it's a match for what our residents have to offer and what their interests are and what makes sense, those types of things. So certainly invite any feedback or discussion on these, but the intent here is that these would be the impetus for reflecting and making sure that what we're doing, all of our initiatives, programs, and activities are in fact being examined through a lens of sustainability.
Councillor, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to staff, I just wanted to, I guess, echo what Councillor Carruthers said as far as, wanting to make sure that the comments that are put into the staff reports are meaningful and that they're not just ticking a box in order to fill out that part of the report template. And I wonder, if it were me trying to prepare a report for council's consideration, it might be helpful if these questions were embedded into the template, so that as I go to write my report, that these questions are there for me to consider each time, and I literally have to delete them in order to fill my report out. I think that might be helpful to use that and make sure that that's done in a meaningful way. Thanks.
Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Further to that, I'm wondering if we could use a scale of 0 to 4, for instance. So when staff are looking at this and they're looking at it and thinking, okay, this report on economic sustainability, it's a 1 or a 2. Then when we're reading it and we're saying, yeah, I can see where it's a 1 or a 2, but they're putting it down as a 4. And like, okay, I'm missing something in this report that you think this is a 4. Help me understand. But if the numbers align to what we're reading in the report, then maybe we don't have any questions. And by staff reflecting, to Councillor Roy DeClemente's point, reflecting on where is it on that scale, and no points off if it's a 0. If it's a 0, it's a 0. Bonus points for being honest about it. But I think it'll give us an idea and a little bit of way to track what we're doing. I like numbers.
Thank you. I'll go to the next slide. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Frank Mazzata, who's going to walk through some of the proposed content around the priorities, the actions, and the key deliverables.
Thank you. The first strategic priority, quality programs and services, focuses on providing value for tax dollars through delivery of programs and services. It supports our economic, environmental, and social goals. The strategic priority will develop high-quality programs to promote healthy and active living for all diverse interests that EG residents are engaged in. Ensuring programs and services will be inclusive, affordable, and accessible to all residents will be key in supporting various things like arts, culture, heritage, and sport. Next slide, please. So some of the key deliverables I'm just going to touch on at a high level. So first one, opportunities that will modernize programs and services for increased efficiency, cost savings, enhancement. So some of the things like programs and services that will incorporate equity and diversity and inclusion, and implementing best practices and to deliver specific community needs to services. Cost-effective management and maintenance of town infrastructure and facilities. These are very important programs, and one of the key things that could be looked at and will continue is asset management plans for long-term budgeting, implementation of 10-year budget, and just regular maintenance activities from various departments that will extend the life of assets. Next slide, please. The next strategic priority, culture of municipal excellence, focuses on fostering a culture of service excellence, engagement, and transparency. Delivering service excellence requires an engaged and strategically aligned staff team. Working together to deliver high-quality services and programs through the understanding of community needs is key, along with ensuring strong fiscal responsibility. Excellence should support innovation and flexibility. Next slide, please. So some key deliverables that we looked at. included some sound financial management and good governance. This would include things like comprehensive business plans and budgets, policies that support good governance, enhanced transparency and accountability through regular communication, and strategic organizational transition and transformation to meet changing needs of corporation and the community. Some of the things that would key deliverables for empowering high-performing staff teams would be professional, well-trained, and highly engaged staff, a focus on service delivery excellence, collaborative through knowledge and understanding, and to develop and implement a customer service excellence strategy. Next slide, please. As the town continues to experience growth, the preservation and protection of our natural environment becomes increasingly more important. This, our next strategic priority. Developing and implementation of policy that supports environmental sustainability and best practices will be key in ensuring environmental stewardship. This, along with the creation of programs that focus on preservation, conservation, protection, and enhancement of our natural environment, will provide staff the tools to engage and educate the building community and residents on the importance of environmental protection. As a result, implementing programs and policy that support climate change adaptation and mitigation will allow East Gwillimbury to become more resilient in our changing world. Next slide, please. So some key deliverables that we have focused on in this section. So the development and implementation of an environmental strategy or climate action plan and updated community energy plan. Some of the other things include strengthen and create policy related to environmental protection. So this would include broadening the Thinking Green development standards to include sustainable technologies and practices. Minimum requirements for low-impact developments. As we move into design of our environmental areas, LIDs have become very important. So this is something that we would like to really push. And strengthening EG's tree preservation and protection program, which we are well on our way right now. A focus on programs and policy that support environmental initiatives is also very important. Programs such as curbside recycling and composting, a multi-year LED streetlight conversion strategy, and stewardship of EG stormwater and sanitary infrastructure that would connect with emerging legislation and reach those goals. I'm just going to pause there and ask if there are any questions at this point.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thanks. Something that's missing from these key deliverables for me is about environmental stewardship in our development planning process. So I know we're going to touch on that in some other slides, but this doesn't stand alone. The growth that's coming, we have to be thinking about environmental stewardship when it comes to planning as well.
Okay. Any other questions?
Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I did want to point out there was a bit of repetitiveness between with respect to our EDI initiative. So diversity and equity and inclusion is under culture of municipal excellence, as well as I believe it was under, it's under two of them. I believe it was under the quality programs and services. So I just want to make sure that we're not repeating ourselves here. And I guess at a higher level, when I'm looking at the key deliverables, I would like to see them even more, I guess the best word is granular, a little bit more detailed. So, for example, when we talk about asset management, laying out what our target would be for our reserve levels, or what a percentage level would be, or things like that, to actually put some KPIs here that we can say whether we met it or not. It's one thing for us to say that we're cost effectively managing our infrastructure, but do we have enough money in reserves to meet our 5 or 10 or 20-year needs in the future? Or, for example, our waste diversion rates. So we can talk about recycling and curbside collection and so on, but what's our target goal? We know what we have now. Are these initiatives strategically going to reach or improve our diversion rates at the curbside? So I'd like to see a little bit more specific, some numbers or some targets for us to try and achieve. And that would go under those, not so much the strategic priorities, but the key deliverables for us to have some specific goals to work towards as a team. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Next slide, please. The fourth strategic priority is to focus on building complete communities. This entails supporting the ability of residents to connect to amenities, services, employment, and each other. This priority supports objectives for future core infrastructure that makes the 15-minute neighborhood a reality. Pedestrian design infrastructure that encourages healthy and active lifestyles to connect with nature, including each other. Fostering placemaking through rejuvenation of existing downtown communities and connecting residents to local business that is just a short walk away. These and supporting efforts to improve availability and quality of telecommunication services begins to build strong community linkages. Next slide, please. Key deliverables. So this one's a really interesting one. So key deliverables, we're looking at including updated policies to support development of housing and employment varieties, and completing the Health and Active Living Plaza, which is currently being constructed. This is an interesting one because Queensville is a really good example of a potential 15-minute community, and the Health and Active Living Plaza is really the first step in that. With the addition of 2 kilometers of Valley Trail in 2023 that will happen, we've included 2.4-meter sidewalks to connect trails to the community center. There are going to be many placemaking opportunities that we are currently working on within parks and streets. And there's also hopefully the next stage of mixed use and commercial lands adjacent to the Health and Active Living Plaza. So looking at that community alone is a really good example of hopefully what a 15-minute community will be. Also included in some of the other key deliverables, completing Holland Landing and Mount Albert downtown revitalization projects, and implement the recommended priorities identified in the town's ATTMP, and supporting efforts to ensure full community access to competitive, affordable, and reliable broadband. And next slide, please. So this is the final strategic priority. It ensures responsible and balanced growth management. Being responsible ensures environmental, economic, and social are core views that will be supported. Ensuring development occurs in an intentional, sustainable fashion. That's environmental. Attraction of strategic investment to support new and existing business, economic. Advocate for a variety of housing options for residents in every stage of life, including diverse job markets for all, social. This priority indicates each lens and will be created to support sustainability. So some of the key deliverables, next slide. And some of the key deliverables within this priority include supporting key development projects that bring investment and jobs, leveraging Advantage EG initiatives to continue to streamline very important developments and processes for new business. Working with partners and advancing major infrastructure projects that support EG's complete communities, and supporting heritage conservation through the development of heritage conservation districts, beginning with the community of Sharon. And that concludes the 5 strategic priorities. Are there any other questions?
Councillor Leahy, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. With regard to the work with partners to advance major infrastructure projects that support EG's complete community objectives, I'd like to see a few more specifics on that. And with regard particularly to our ongoing sewage allocations issues, and I think that that's not mentioned anywhere specifically. So I was seeking some clarification or expansion on that aspect of infrastructure.
Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Under the strategic actions, we have ensure development occurs in an intentional, sustainable fashion, et cetera, but that doesn't really translate into key deliverables. So how are we going to deliver that? I'm looking for language that would say we're going to stop building stranded communities. That would be ideal language for me, but something that speaks to that. I just think if it's a strategic action, then there should be a key deliverable that we're looking for on that.
Certainly, through you, Madam Mayor, if I could just respond to that and to the Councillor Leahy's comment. We intentionally took the perspective of trying to describe the deliverables at a very high level based on the last conversation and sort of wanting to avoid being too granular in terms of, traffic mitigation was the example. The objective is to enhance community safety, but trying to list out every action that we're going to do over the next 4 years could get a little unwieldy. So it's just trying to find that balance between providing enough detail that it's meaningful, but recognizing that detail does appear in budgets. So maybe there's a better mechanism of connecting the dots between what appears in the budget documents and the specific initiatives and what's in this document. And then I guess getting your thoughts on the previous document was fairly high level, and I believe intended to be sort of digestible and easily understood to sort of give a sense of what we were working on. And I think there's merit to having that kind of a resource, but would it be council's preference to go a little further and include more specific detail in this document, or have sort of a high-level summary version and then also have a more comprehensive version that would list KPIs attached to each of the deliverables? I mean, I think we could go, we could certainly do sort of a summary version and a more robust version, or we could, we could build the KPIs into whatever is going to be distributed. I mean, they're all public documents, but whatever is going to be widely distributed.
I'm not seeing comments, preference or not. Councillor, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand not wanting to be too granular, but there are, we're already in the budget process, and there are very expensive projects that are in our budget binders that aren't necessarily reflected in our strategic plan. And for example, under responsible growth, community secondary plans that address the White Belt lands. That's a $2 million project that isn't really shown in our strategic plan. We know where we're going to do it, but it's not shown here. And to Councillor Leahy's point about infrastructure and servicing, perhaps that's where you start to get granular, which sends that message that says, we're going to do these secondary plans that reflect our desire to see phasing plans and infrastructure investments that reflect our allocation policy, or something to that effect, so that you're knitting together those initiatives and your goals so that you can communicate to the universe. We don't want stranded communities. We know we need significant investment in infrastructure, and here are some of the big, large-scale projects that we're going to undertake to get there.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, just on the point of partners, there was a reference, I believe it's in the corporate strategic priorities to, I believe, the region, Build Association and a few others. And I guess the concern was that if you name some and you miss some, what does that mean? So that's why we kind of went to sort of high level working with partners. Certainly we can revisit this and go back. I think the idea of stranded communities is a key objective, and it's certainly an example or defending against having stranded communities. But that's not all that is encompassed in, effective planning. And so just finding that balance of, maybe it's more, here are some examples, it's not an exhaustive list, but these are things that we're doing toward these key deliverables, to give it a think, I guess. But also keeping in mind that, in terms of, what's, that we prepare a document that is digestible, understood, and in language that is accessible. So trying to find that balance. So I would see that a more fulsome document would be informing departmental and individual work plans, and being able to, speak to specific key performance indicators. And then perhaps there's room for a more high-level summary document that's can be more accessible for the public, that kind of thing. Okay.
If I may.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we need to say that, to have the word stranded communities necessarily in the strategic plan and in that document, but to reflect that we need those secondary plans to address our phasing policies that reflect our desire to build responsible, complete communities. And you can't have a 15-minute, if you go back, can't have a 15-minute community if you're building stranded communities.
Right.
So that goes without saying, I guess. But I think for us, it's what are the big projects that we need to implement that will get us there? And phasing our allocation policy and those secondary plans, once those are done, we can say, yeah, they're done and we've ticked it off because we're being responsible in doing that, rather than simply allowing the development community, for example, to come to us with their plans and their own suggested way of moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Johns.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think that as I'm listening to kind of the conversation going back and forth about high level and a bit more detail, I feel, and every organization is different, and we call this a strategic plan, and I think that strategic plans typically are high level, and I think that for us, I think being the EG folks that we are, that we like to get our hands dirty, and I think that and I'm not sure if that's kind of like the nod that we gave in November, and pardon my ignorance, because being new, the nod that we almost gave to the moving forward on the business plan leading into the budget so the team can do the work on the budget. And so personally, for me, like, I would love to keep it at a high level and then have a robust document with these tangible deliverables on it that are able to very transparently communicate what success is. And but it's different for every organization. Maybe it's one big comprehensive document with items that are pulled out. I don't know. But I do think that if we can nail these high-level items in the right way, to Councillor Roy DiClementi's comment about having them feed back into that, and we can reference it and we can control it, then for me, that's what success would look like at the higher level.
Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
I think the challenge is going from the strategic plan to the business plan. And after 4 years on council, we get our budget binder and we delve right into the numbers. And I'm not sure that we pause long enough on the business plan portion of it. And I think that will pick up some of these key deliverables that we're talking about, is to have a really good discussion around the business plan. And now, obviously, the budget is related to that. They can't be done completely separately. But I think some of the discussion that I'm hearing here is best placed in the business plan on an annual basis. but it has to link back. We have to have the strategic plan and say, this is what we want to do in 4 years. We're going to start here. And when we as council are looking at it saying, but shouldn't you be starting on this one over here? It's going to take 4 years to get to. Staff we can have that conversation. But I think when we look at the business plan along with the budget at the same time, we don't give the business plan the time and attention it needs, and we're trying to put that all into the strategic plan when it actually belongs in the business plan.
Any other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any at this time.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I think I'm still processing, but I think there is a way to have a document that speaks to high-level strategic priorities and connect that through line to the business plan. Our business plan is obviously 1 year in duration, but that you should be able to say this project relates to this strategic priority, this is the KPI for this project, and there's a logical sequence. And so those things will, for the most part, be completed many of them will be completed within this year, and then we'll start new things and have to go through the same process when we have a new business plan and budget for following years. I think doing it that way rather than trying to embed it into the strategy may be more workable because, for example, I just think back to, strategic investment attraction. We don't know yet what our opportunities in 3 and 4 years are going to be. We can have sort of hypothetical KPIs around numbers, but because we're restricted with servicing, there's a lot of unknowns. But if I was to talk to you about my business plan, I could speak very specifically about these are the steps I'm going to take to initiate investment attraction in this sector, that kind of thing. So I think we can come back with something that sort of allows you to visualize how they work together in a complementary way. The next piece I wanted to talk about, if we could turn to the next slide, would be to your vision for public and key stakeholder engagement once we have a draft strategy that we're happy with. But I think it's helpful for the comms team, especially to have an understanding of what supports are going to be needed. I think we talked at some point in this process about, engaging our committees of council and inviting their feedback. In other municipalities that I've facilitated strategic planning, and we've posted a draft of the strategy on a website, and that had a very robust, social media campaign around letting people know that it was there and what options they had to provide comment. And then we could probably work with our partners at the library to make sure that there were accessible options for people as well, and have a commenting period of, for example, 30 days, which is sort of in line with a lot of our other project reviews, that type of thing. So just wanted to take this opportunity to get your thoughts on what your expectations were with regard to public engagement.
I can tell you from myself, I'm not seeing that anybody else has their hand up yet. I think it's essential that we have public engagement. How we do it, we've done in the past a variety of opportunities with different mediums, and it will really depend on what our community needs. Is it a public meeting? We fill the council chambers. Is it some kind of a document that we send out and they evaluate it and send it back to us? It could be individual communities that we go out and meet in the community and share the ideas that so far have come forward, but making sure that they realize that this is a work in progress, and there's nothing complete at this point. I think the community is very excited about the future in East Gwillimbury, and I really believe that they want to be a part of making that happen.
Thank you.
Any other ideas about getting people engaged? I'm certainly wanting wanting to hear that as well. I think the times have changed. People used to move into communities and be satisfied with what was there. And we're now in a community or a time when people move into a community and want to have input into it. They like what they saw, they bought it, and now they want to come in and be a part of what's taking place and put their touch to it as well. Councillor Crone has a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I would agree with you 100% that I think public engagement is absolutely essential. I think that will be a critical part of the success of this and formulating it and building it out. The challenge we've had in the past is that our communications outreaches have not always brought in as much feedback as we would like. So, and I don't have the answers tonight about how we could increase that. I would encourage you to look to some other municipalities that have done the same. See if there's some best practices out there that we haven't thought of that we could, emulate. Plagiarize, whatever. We need to get that input increased. But I think all of our residents have a genuine interest in knowing and wanting to help shape where this town is going. So I think we just have to tap into it, and we will. I think we'll be pleasantly surprised with the feedback we get. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Johns, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see also on the slide as well, and I'm not looking to jump ahead, but we were talking about the public engagement, but also as a team here internally. And I think that we can't go out to the public and we can have conversations with the public and invite feedback. And when the time comes, we need to live and breathe it. I am excited about the opportunity that when we arrive at completion and we've got our books, I intend to have it on this desk here. I intend to have it in the office. One of my first meetings that I had with CAO Webster, we talked about, and we pointed to the wall, and on the wall is the plan. And our CAO made the comment that this is what success is, and if I'm not working through this, I'm off track. And I think that I was very proud that he said that. And I think that as we work through this exercise, this doesn't mean that what we're coming up with here is perfect. If we go to the public and they say we should be changing something, then we need to receive that, and then we need to believe in it. And then once we believe in it, I think we need it on our desk, we need it on our walls, because if we aren't the champions of it to the public, then a marketing campaign on social media is not going to have the results that we want, because with all of the amazing staff that we have in this town, I think that if they are able to champion it without question, I think that that will really drive success.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I also think that in addition to that public feedback, it's to the point about staff. I'd like to hear from staff, from our frontline staff. Are we on the right track? They have to live it and breathe it just as much as we do, and maybe even more so. And so if it's one thing for us to sit in this room and say, well, we'd like to do X, Y, and Z, but if our staff think that that's a bad idea, that's going to be a bit of a challenge to achieve. And I want to hear from them. Are we on the right track? Because it's their careers too. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think timing is really important. To do a real robust community engagement will take weeks, if not months. And already we're looking at a budget that's based on a strategic plan that some of the people at this table weren't here for. So I'm wondering if we can do some outreach on the business plan portion of it. And that way we can do a better job each year over the course of the 4 years, spending more time trying different ways to outreach. this strategic plan doesn't have anything in it that should be at all shocking to our residents. It's very similar to our last strategic plan. And, you know, we've been out in the community. Some people here have knocked doors and talked to our residents. And I think if we were way off the mark on a strategic plan, we would have heard that from people. So I'd like to proceed with thinking that the strategic plan is in line with what we think we need to do. We're not getting pushback from residents on it. So now let's get them engaged in taking it from this step to that next step. But saying that, I really like Councillor Roy DeClemente's idea of reaching out to staff. That can be done quickly. And I think their input there is really key. I'm not saying we shouldn't reach out to the community, but I think it won't be robust. And so let's not kid ourselves about that. We just don't have the time for it.
Councillor Foster, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, again, to go along with Councillor Roy DeClemente's idea of reaching out to staff, which is important, but I think it's equally important that we reach out to our committees of council. They work pretty close with us on a lot of initiatives. Not only gauging staff's idea, but I think we need to gauge the committee's ideas too. So Councillor Crothers mentioned, how long do we expect this to take? And it will take a while if we begin to reach out that way, for sure. But I think it's useful.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I could offer some thoughts that I think with respect to staff, I agree, and I expect that, you know, with the help of my colleagues in communications, we'll come back with a robust communication strategy that's both external and internal, because, you know, as I've noted here, there's, you know, it's not just about making sure that the strategy is, you know, makes sense and aligns with what we're able to do, but also, you know, to Councillor John's point, like being able to speak to the core purpose. And I think having that, that will require its own sort of initiative in terms of creating awareness and engagement with the strategic plan. But I think that in terms of the input and what we have identified as key deliverables, staff have been part of building that. You know, they've been part of building the corporate strategic priorities as part of the budget planning process. So I think I would be very surprised if we saw any really divergent views from what is identified here, because, but I still think it's important to validate and go back and say, have we reflected what, you know, what is most important? The same being said for the public. We went into this process sort of with everything fresh in terms of what you've been hearing on the campaign trail, and that in itself is a great way of being able to tap into what's on the minds of the residents and businesses, and in that sense, the draft strategy can be more about validating that, yes, we have reflected what we thought we heard, and I think that with respect to the business plan, and part of the strategy document should capture that, is how we're going to report back to you regularly on our efforts and our progress and our success, or challenges that we run into in terms of achieving the objectives, and being very clear in managing those expectations. You know, this is our business plan and budget for this year, and we're going to have a report halfway through, and then we're going to have another report at the end of the year, and those kinds of things. So I think you know, if it really is at council's discretion, you know, the level of engagement you'd like to see, but I am conscious of, you know, your point, Councillor Carruthers, that, you know, to do a robust sort of roundtables, you know, which you might do if you were starting from scratch, is a pretty time-intensive exercise. And I would argue that we're not really starting from scratch, because what you brought into this discussion was what you heard directly in the campaign. So. I don't know what else, where I was going with that, but I'm seeing nodding heads. So.
But you got there.
Yeah. Okay. But I guess, very long story short, is we will come back with a you know, a comprehensive communication strategy that speaks to all of that. But I think that finding a way to ensure that the strategic plan is something that every every member of staff owns as much as council is going to be really important to making sure it's success. And I think it also helps with that alignment as reports come forward and as we identify new projects.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Bégin, perhaps I can ask this with respect to public engagement. You've done this process before. You've done the public outreach. What kind of meaningful engagement can we expect based on your experience? Because it seems to me that this would be a challenge to, aside from our engaged community committees, the regular resident doesn't really, they want to make sure that their garbage is picked up, that when they call 911, a fire truck shows up. I feel like asking the community for engagement, what are what points should we be trying to engage the community? I think the business plan and budget might give us more meaningful feedback if we were to go to the public. And so if we're going to go to the public about the strat plan and then on the heels say, oh, we're doing the budget and give us your feedback there, I wonder, in your experience, have you had people come back to you and say, that pillar isn't the right pillar, I think you need to do this? Or is it much more detailed in, well, I think you should be collecting my garbage every week instead of every second week? What kind of, in your experience, what kind of feedback would we expect?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yeah, it's unfortunately not everybody gets excited when they hear the word strategy like I do. So in my, you raise a good point that sometimes the comments are sort of granular and it's really, my neighbor's dog is barking as opposed to, but I do think that it's worthwhile to at least invite participation and something that as simple as having it available on our website, having a very easy form to complete that, invites comments in a, very simple way, and then have some other accessible alternatives. I think it's important because it is the vision for our community for the next 4 years, and you typically don't get a lot of feedback from the public, but every once in a while you get a thoughtful, considered response that's really important, and so I wouldn't want to necessarily close that door. I do think, to your point, that you probably get more engaged discussion from our volunteer committees, and I think that may maybe that's more of a facilitated discussion as opposed to just here's a survey to complete, similar to the interviews that were conducted with members of council, to really ensure that we get and are able to capture their feedback and then reflect it back to you. So.
I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think we have sort of covered that last item in terms of how the themes are reflected in council reports, and we have some thoughts on how those reports might be structured. And I think as part of that, we'll need to sort of give some thought to how we build that capacity in-house and train staff to be able to prepare the reports in a way that considers those lenses and so that they're able to articulate to you and give you the assurance that they have indeed considered those questions. I don't have anything further for this evening. I think we've got lots to work on and come back with my commitment to members of council will be to come back with a revised draft strategy document and try to better align it and show how it aligns with the business plan and corporate priorities and extend those into some key performance indicators and work with my colleagues on the communications team to start developing a communication and engagement strategy once we have a draft strategy that we're happy with.
Go ahead, please.
And sorry, I'm just thinking ahead on the calendar, and you're going back and completing that work with the team. What is, if I'm picturing the calendar, what is the timeline for presenting that back to us? This next step that you're going to take? No pressure.
No pressure. I'm not sure, that might be a CAO Webster question to know when we have a next workshop window, I guess.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Margot. Very interesting discussion tonight and a lot of value added. We start our business plan and budget deliberations at the end of the month, and we've been trying to do the processes concurrently. I really value the fact that the business plan initiatives are core to the strategic plan, and I think that will help this process. I think some of the communication initiatives that we talked about, frankly, engaging staff, we can do relatively quickly through town halls and, coffee with the facilitation team and the various general managers. And I think as well, we'll be able to engage at least the chairs of the advisory committees, if not all of the advisory committee members as well. And I'm hopeful that our goal has been to try to move towards having our tax levy budget approved by the end of February. And I would really hope that we could move the strategic plan along, and we'll make the necessary changes to, we have several workshops planned in the February time cycle as well. So we will certainly prioritize to get this back to council, and we've been working with Margot and her team on this to prioritize it. So best thing I could say is we'll do our best to try to deliver both the documents, the budget and the budget business plan and the overall strategic plan for the end of February.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. With that, thank you very much. I know that there's been a tremendous amount of work put into this project, and every member of council are engaged in this in a variety of sometimes different ways, and I think that's helpful as well. We're certainly looking forward to a finished product and know that our community will step up and be a part of it as well. So with that, I'm not seeing any other comments, so I will move into the remainder of our agenda. Be it resolved that the council workshop presentation entitled Council Strategic Planning dated January 16th, 2023 be received. Could I have Councillor Johns and Councillor Hay move that for us, please? All in favor? And that's carried. Our confirming bylaw, be it resolved that the bylaw 2023-002, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of special meeting of Municipal Council held on January 16th, 2023, be taken as read and acted and signed by the Mayor and Municipal Clerk. Could I have Councillor Crothers and Councillor Roy DeClemente move and second that? Thank you very much. All those in favor? And that is carried. And an adjournment at 7:02, moved by Councillor Foster and Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much.